Good morning students. In previous class I was explaining you about chapter 3 geography, the earth movements. So the earth movements are divided on the basis of the forces which act in the interior of the earths. So these forces are endogenic forces and exogenic forces. Endogenic I was already explained to you. Now I am going to explain you exogenic forces. Exogenic forces that work on the surface of the earth are called as exogenic forces. Exo means outside, genic means origin, means the forces that originate on the outside of the earth's surface is known as exogenic forces. So the weathering, erosion and deposition are the main agents of the exogenic forces. So the weathering, erosion and deposition create the different landforms on the surface of the earth. First I will explain you weathering. Weathering is the action of the breaking down existing rocks into smaller pieces. We can say like this also. Weathering is the breaking up of the rocks on the earth's surface is known as a weathering. Erosion. Erosion is transport of these particles by wind, water or gravities. The materials moved by erosions is a sediment. So the erosion is the wearing away of the landscape of different agents like water, wind and ice, and the eroded materials is carried away or transported by water, wind, etc. and eventually is deposited. And this process of erosion and depositions is create a different landforms on the earth's surface. So these are the different landforms. They create the changes in the earth's surface. So now let's move to the works of the river. The running water in the river erodes the landscape and also create the different changes on the earth's surface. So the following features are made by the river are waterfall, meanders, oxbow lake, floodplain, levees and delta. So first feature I am going to explain you waterfall. A waterfall is a place where the flowing river rapidly drops and elevations as it flows over a steep regions or a cliff. Or we can say like this also, when the river falls suddenly at a steep angle over a very hard rocks or down a steep valley side, it forms a waterfall. The second feature of a river is meanders. So river cause changes on the surface over which it flows. So meander, it is a snake pattern of the water stream formed by alternatively eroding sediments from the outside of the bend and depositing them on the insides. So the water enters and the plain, it twists and turns and forming the large bends. These bends are known as meanders. So now let's move to the third feature of the river, Oxbow Lake. So due to continuous erosion and depositions along the sides of meanders, the ends of the meander loop come closer and closer. In due to course of time, the meander loop cuts off from the river and forms the cut-off lake, and that is also called a oxbow lake. An oxbow lake is a U-shaped body of water formed when a wide meander form the main streams of a river is cut off to create a lake, and this landform is called an oxbow lake for the distinctive curved shape that result from this process. Fourth feature of a river is floodplain. So when river overflows its bank, it lead to the flooding of the neighboring areas. As it floods, it deposits layer of the fine soil and other materials called the sediments along its banks, and this lead to the formation of floodplain. Then fifth feature of the river is levees. Levees means an embankment designed to prevent the flooding of the river is known as a levees. So the raised banks are called the levees. So as the river approaches the sea, the shape of flowing water decreases and the river begins to break up into a number of streams. They are called a distributor. So now let's move to the last feature of the river is delta. Delta are formed at the mouth of a river where the water flows into the ocean or other water body, and when a river carrying sediments reaches a body of standing water, it reduces its velocities and causing it to deposits the sediments at the mouth. So as the river approaches the sea, the speed of the flowing water is decreases and the river begins to break up into a number of streams is called a distributaries, and the river becomes so slow so that it begins to deposit its load, and each distributaries form its own mouth, and the collections of sediments form all the mouths, they are form the delta. Work of the sea waves. The erosion and deposition of the sea waves create a different features of the coastal landforms. The features of the sea waves are sea caves, sea arcs, struck, and sea cliff. First feature is the sea cave. Sea waves continuously hit at the rocks and cracks develops in these rocks. So over the time they become larger and wider. Thus hollow-like caves are formed on the rocks and they are called the sea caves. And as these cavities become bigger and bigger, only the roof of the caves remain, thus forming the sea arcs. So when the caves become bigger and bigger, only the roofs of the caves remain and form the sea arcs. Next, stacks. Further erosions breaks the roof and only walls are left, and these walls like features are called the stacks. Last, fourth feature of a sea waves are sea cliff. So the steep rocky coast rising almost vertically above the sea water is called the sea cliff. So the sea waves deposit sediments along the shores and forming the beaches. So now let's move to the next topic, work of the ice. The features of the ice are glaciers and glaciers moraines. First feature of a ice is a glacier. Glaciers are rivers of ice which to erode the landscape. So a glacier is a large masses of ice moving slowly over some land surface or down a valley, formed over a long periods from the accumulations of snow in the areas where the amount of snow that falls exceeds the amount that melts. So as the ice melts, they get filled up with water and become a beautiful lakes in the mountains. And the second feature of a ice is glacier moraines. So the material carried by the glacier, such as a rock and big and small, sand and silt, gets deposited, and these deposits form the glacier moraines. Now let's move to the last topic of this chapter is work of the wind. So an active agents of erosion and depositions in the desert is wind. The features of the wind are mushroom rocks, sand dunes, and loess. So in desert area, we can see rocks in the shape of a mushroom is commonly known as a mushroom rocks. In desert area, wind erode the lower section of the rock more than the upper part. Therefore, such rocks have a narrower base and wider top. So an active agent of erosion and depositions in the desert is wind. So in deserts, rocks in the shape of a mushrooms is commonly known as a mushroom rocks. Next work of the wind is sand dunes. So when the wind blows, it lifts and transport sand from one place to another. Or when it stops blowing, the sand falls and gets deposited. It low hill like a structure called a sand dunes, means small hills of a sand is known as a sand dunes. Loess. When the grains of sand are very fine and light, so the wind can carry it over a very long distances. When such sand is deposited in a large area, it is called a loess. And large deposit of loess is found in China. Now your chapter 3rd, geography is completed. If anybody is having any doubt, any problem, so you can call me or send me a text message. Thank you.